The 2000s, a decade which specifically means a lot to me as it gave birth to many of my all-time favorite fashion trends, all-time favorite films, and it of course gave birth to me. Many people look very fondly upon the 2000s. The art was more real, the people were more real, and the aesthetics were freaking insane. Y2K, a term which initially referred to the Y2K problem or the millennium bug, a computer issue that arose as the year 2000 approached. Many older computer systems stored years using 2 digits, for example 99 for the year 1999. So when the year rolled over to 2000, these same systems would read as 00, which could be mistaken for 1900. This risked a whole bunch of errors in calculations, financial systems, and other very important things. Since then, however, the term has been used in culture to very simply describe the late 1900s to early 2000s era, specifically in fashion design and aesthetics. There are many different versions of Y2K, each visually different from the last. So stick with me as we take a brief trip through time and cover all 8 of the main Y2K aesthetics.
Everything chrome.
Everything is chrome in the future.
Y2K Futurism, sometimes also referred to as Cyber Y2K, was prevalent from roughly 1997 all the way to 2004. At its core, it blends blobby shapes and CGI with a very bright, often chrome color palette. I describe the visuals as tacky, but in the best way possible. It's as if they knew their CGI and effects were bad, so they kind of just decided to play on it, if that makes sense. The aesthetic seeped its way into almost everything, being used for music videos, promotional material, and literally any kind of physical object that you can think of. Let's talk about that. Blobjects are often brightly colored household items which feature smooth curves and no sharp edges. They blend Y2K Futurism's blobby shapes and futuristic vibe with, again, damn near any objects that you can think of. The iMac G3 is probably the most infamous blobject and arguably actually boomed the entire aesthetic. Its super rounded design paired with the various pastel colors and see-through shell case just scream Y2K. There are then of course products like the Volkswagen Beetle, these things from McDonald's, and literally all the video game consoles from around this time, especially those ones that were like the special edition ones where the shells were like see-through and in all of these different colors, especially those. What's interesting about blobjects is once you know what they are, you kind of can't help but notice how prevalent they have really been. You begin to see just how many products actually derived from this style and were inspired by it, whether intentionally or not. As a whole, I really do adore Y2K Futurism. I think the visuals are super cool, super bold, and of course infinitely creative.
Jet Set Radio!
Vectorheart is damn near like the opposite of Y2K Futurism, where Y2K Futurism primarily focuses on things being 3D, shiny, and of course blobby. Vectorheart is pretty much entirely 2D and instead features very striking vector shapes, dynamic diagonal lines, and high contrast color palettes. With that said, Vectorheart is pretty awesome, and that is a word I don't usually use, but I feel like here it's appropriate. It was commonly used for the music and technology of this era, but I think most evidently it was used for the video games of this era. When I see Vectorheart, I instantly think of older games like Jet Set Radio and Wipeout 2097, as well as newer games like Hi-Fi Rush and Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. As a whole, Vectorheart is definitely a cool little crevice of Y2K media, and I feel it perfectly represents the 2000s angsty video gaming teen. Gen X Soft Club probably has the weirdest name on this list. It emerged in the late 1900s to early 2000s as a toned down, more sophisticated counterpart to the flashy Y2K and McBling trends of the time. It was catered to the Gen Xers at the time, hence the name Gen X Soft Club, with the Soft Club hinting at a gentler, more urban club culture. Gen X Soft Club seeped its way into most things, from cinema all the way to beauty cosmetics, but it is, in my opinion, most notorious for the iconic music covers and music videos that it's birthed. Sounded very posh there. Where Y2K Futurism had a massive impact on physical objects or blobjects, and Vectorheart had its own massive impact on video games, I feel Gen X Soft Club had its biggest impact on music. It is the music aesthetic of Y2K. Artists like Radiohead, the Chemical Brothers, and Fatboy Slim are literally Gen X Soft Club in music form, sonically and visually. Their music videos present the same aesthetics with an emphasis on minimalism and liminal spaces, along with cool blues and greens to back all of it. Tell me I didn't just describe like every Radiohead music video. Overall, Gen X Soft Club is very dope and also very nostalgic. Is that just me that feels that way? I don't know. It's super nostalgic, but yeah, it's cool. Super cool. Shouts outs to the Gen Xers.
Wow, your house is really nice. I know, right?
Alright, let's talk about it. What is arguably the Y2K aesthetic. I'm even getting a little excited talking about it. McBling. So I decided I'd make a little table to visually show what each Y2K aesthetic correlates to, at least in my opinion. Y2K Futurism, as you can see, objects. Vectorheart is, of course, video games. Gen X Soft Club, music. And I feel McBling definitely belongs right here with fashion. McBling is a fashion and pop culture aesthetic that dominated the early to mid 2000s, with a resurgence during the 2020s, which is arguably still going on to this day. It is often seen as the very glitzy, maximalist successor to Y2K style, and I feel a few brands that encapsulate McBling perfectly would be Juicy Couture, Ed Hardy, Dior, Louis Vuitton. I kind of overall see it as a very casual, playful take on luxury fashion. And this is a huge part of McBling, as during this time, celebs were for once not just photographed at red carpets, but also places like Starbucks, nightclubs, or even just shopping sprees. This was the first time we had seen celebs essentially in their natural habitat. This everyday luxury became aspirational and only furthered the McBling craze. Overall, there is a reason why McBling is the Y2K aesthetic, as it at one point literally dominated anything regarding pop culture, from film to music and even tech. When I think of the aesthetic, I think of Mean Girls, I think of Britney Spears, I think of the Neptunes, Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian. Basically, McBling is super fly and is one of those rare aesthetics that not only reached massive mainstream popularity, but also managed to stay visually striking and genuinely enjoyable to look at. So Metalheart is kind of weird, as in I don't really know what its is. Every aesthetic so far has had a very clear thing about them. You look at these images and your mind instantly correlates them to something. Now look at this image and tell me, what does your mind correlate it with? Don't get me wrong, Metalheart is obviously really cool, but I'm just struggling with where to put it on here. Sometimes it makes me think of video games, specifically the original Xbox, and yes, it has dabbled in music and even a little fashion with industrial and cybergoth aesthetics, but I don't think it in itself can be tied into any medium really. With that said though, Metalheart essentially mixes futuristic mechanical imagery with edgy emotional symbolism, leaning into the darker and more industrial side of Y2K. Think chrome, silver and metallic textures, all 3D rendered to create a more complex vision for the future, especially when compared to Y2K Futurism. Metalheart definitely rocks, and honestly I feel more than anything it is a nice bit of digital art history, and to be honest I think I will put it on my table after all, right there where it belongs.
A puppy? Who's gonna walk him?
I am. Come on, Techno, come on.
Without a doubt, Chromecore is definitely the technology part of Y2K. It was popular in the early to mid 2000s and focused on metallic looking products and objects, and literally 95% of these said products were indeed pieces of technology, most commonly CDs, DVDs, computers, phones, digital cameras, and also toys, as robotic toys were all the rage during this time, and the majority of these said robotic toys were metallic or chrome. Iconic Chromecore products include the Sony Discman, the Apple iPod, the PS2 Slim, and the very first DS, which I had and lost in an IKEA when I was like 6. So Chromecore also draws a lot from late 90s and early 2000s techno futurism with cultural roots in 2000s electronica. Think Daft Punk, think underground club graphics, think rave flyers, and think cyber goth style. As a whole, it's interesting just how prominent chrome is within Y2K, with many of the aesthetics using it, but somehow all in pretty different ways compared to Chromecore's more mature and luxury approach. Chromecore is cool. Chromecore is kinda timeless, and Chromecore is live.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
90s cool is, in one hand, often used to describe the effortless style and attitude that defined the 1990s, and is, in the other hand, used to describe a very specific kind of Y2K aesthetic, which was prevalent in the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. We will of course today be taking the blue pill. 90s cool is without a doubt the film aesthetic of Y2K, with the main driving influence for it being 1999's The Matrix. The aesthetic is even sometimes referred to as the Matrix effect rather than 90s cool. That's how tied they are. 90s cool is a mashup of rave culture, hacker underground, and martial arts cinema, literally all combined into one. And let me tell you, this visual language didn't just change sci-fi, but it literally rewired cinema for years to come, with films like Equilibrium, Underworld, and Resident Evil being super clear babies of 90s cool. Even the superhero genre, which is currently the biggest genre in the world, was at one point fully inspired by 90s cool, with X-Men ditching the comic accurate bright costumes for all black leather uniforms, very Matrix coded. And even 2000 Spider-Man presenting Matrix style bullet time sequences. 90s cool will forever be super prevalent within cinema and was a literal game changer. Fashion wise, it created a fusion of techwear vibes with long coats, sleek boots and sunglasses at night. This went on to inspire brands like Dior and Balenciaga to push futuristic minimalism post the Matrix. Overall, I feel 90s cool has somehow managed to age, I'm not gonna lie, but somehow simultaneously kind of stay cool, no pun intended.
Oh no.
So, last but not least is Fantasy Y2K. Arguably the strangest and most specific aesthetic on this list. That doesn't mean I don't like it though. Fantasy Y2K genuinely goes hard. It interprets traditional medieval fantasy themes through the lens of early 2000s fashion, basically blending traditional fantasy costumes with what was at the time modern hairstyles, makeup and silhouettes. See, I'm a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that's a show that essentially mixes classic horror with Y2K fashion and themes. This is basically that, but with fantasy elements rather than horror elements. So understandably, I am a fan of this aesthetic. Speaking of Buffy, quickly, I feel Buffy is a show which perfectly encapsulates a certain other vibe, a certain other aesthetic even. See, I did some thinking and decided, nah, I don't agree with you, aestheticsfandom.com. I think there are actually 9 Y2K aesthetics rather than 8. Let me introduce you to horror Y2K. I was honestly super surprised to find out that this aesthetic doesn't already exist. It's somehow not officially cited on any forums or general information wikis. Visually, Buffy presents us with a lot of shadowy blues, deep reds, muted earth tones and candlelit crypts, creating a very specific type of vibe that you could only really get from a 2000s TV show. These aesthetic elements are presented in a whole bunch of media, not just Buffy. Ginger Snaps, Blair Witch 2, Craft, Sabrina the Teenage Witch. There are just so many of them, and to be honest, I may just make an entire video on this topic, on horror Y2K. But yeah, as far as where it goes on my list, I don't know. We'll put it and Fantasy Y2K in TV, I guess, television, because why not? I think they look quite nice there. Ooh, and just like that, we are done. All 8 or 9 finished. If I had to pick my favorite, call me basic, but no, it has to be McBling, right? Or maybe horror Y2K trademark. If you're a fan of Y2K and Y2K aesthetics, feel free to leave a like, and if you are potentially a fan of me and my content, then consider subscribing, you know, if you want to. With that said, my peoples, love you all. Love, 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 love.